Thank you for asking me to speak tonight. I know you thought I came to talk about the dangers of drugs and alcohol, and I did, but what I really want to talk to you about is forks. Specifically, I want you to recognize when you're at a fork in the road of your life so you can make thoughtful and informed decisions. I'm talking about major life decisions, where to go to college, who to marry, whether or not to have kids. Decisions that will have a domino effect on each future choice down the road. When someone offers you alcohol, nicotine, marijuana, or any drug, you will be at a fork in the road of your life. That is what I hope to convince you of in the next 15 minutes or so. And the most crucial fork, the time for the greatest influence on your future, is in the beginning, when you first start using, if you do. This is Peter in a family photo. He was the second tallest and the second youngest. He loved basketball and had two different colored eyes. When he was 19 years old, he and his best friend were on their way to the movies when their car was struck so hard by a drunk driver that Peter was killed and his friend suffered permanent severe brain damage. The woman driving the car, who was an alcoholic, survived. When that drunk woman was 13 or 14 and had her first drink, I'm sure she didn't know that she was at a fork in the road and that she chose the path that would lead to the death of this boy. How do I know she was a young teen when she had her first drink? Because study after study shows that early drug and alcohol use is a setup for addiction. Her choice long ago and again that night started a domino effect that ended lives, broke hearts, and changed the future for this family. Imagine for a moment what you want your life in high school to look like and your life beyond. If you know the future you're after, you'll be more likely to choose it when faced with difficult decisions. Really imagine what you want. Studies show that imagining can actually change the structure of your brain. Most of you hope to have good relationships with your parents. Maybe not quite this huggy for some of you, but at least getting along. Your siblings can be annoying, I know, but you have to admit things are easier when you can keep the peace with them. Maybe you imagine a close group of friends, or just one bestie, or at least some nice kids to text near. Maybe you dream of straight A's or straight A's and B's. Looking beyond high school, maybe you imagine playing for UConn, being an ER doctor, a contractor, or even a principal. That seems like a really fantastic life, but if you pour beer on it or blow smoke or vape on it, you put all or some of those dreams at risk. Drugs and alcohol increase the likelihood of problems with relationships, academics, injuries, money, and can lead to isolation. Let me see if I was able to guess some of the things that aren't in the direction of your dreams. Getting an STI. Alcohol increases the likelihood that someone will engage in sexually risky behavior, increasing the likelihood of getting an STI. Or spending your Friday nights doing this instead of going to the homecoming game. You probably didn't imagine permanently putting your friend in a wheelchair by crashing while driving intoxicated. None of you ever dreams of being the victim of sexual assault or the perpetrator. Alcohol is involved in half of sexual assaults by either the victim, the perpetrator, or both. Anyone say to themselves, I'd really like to spend some of high school with my head in a toilet? Probably not. I hope many of you haven't been to a funeral. Just last week, I took care of a 17-year-old boy who caused a funeral. He walked away from an accident that happened because he was driving drunk. His friend who was in the car died. The police were in the ER with the driver and took him away once we checked him out. His life that was full of so much potential will never be the same. In the beginning, I told you that if and when you start using drugs and alcohol, you will be at a fork in the road. That decision to start using, even just once at first, is much bigger than it may seem at first glance. Let me tell you why. Many of you know the age at which a brain fully matures. It's in the mid-20s, but please don't mistake brain maturity with intelligence. These kids and you are very intelligent. Malala won the Nobel Peace Prize at 17. This 14-year-old invented a printer that can print Braille from websites so blind people can surf the web. In fact, Louis Braille himself was a kid when he invented Braille. Greta Thunberg is educating and inspiring millions of people to make positive changes for the earth. To say someone lacks a fully mature brain isn't a judgment, it's just a physiologic fact. Your brains are still maturing, and that's awesome. Connections are being laid down. It's getting stronger and more efficient. You have an amazing capacity to learn and an incredible rate. Be excited and proud that you've got so much potential. Our brains mature from back to front. So the very last part to mature is our prefrontal cortex. Why is this a big deal? Because our prefrontal cortex is involved in anticipating consequences and making good decisions. Without a fully developed prefrontal cortex, you're more likely to make decisions quickly and based on emotion rather than reason. The most exciting thing I learned about the brain as I prepared for this talk is that your reward centers are supercharged. So if something rewarding happens to you, a beautiful sunset, your favorite song, finding money in your pocket, your reward center goes crazy. In order to study this, a scientist put teens and adults into something called a functional MRI, which takes pictures of the brain in action. She gave both adults and teens sugar water, asked them if they liked it, they all did, and then watched their brains. The adult brains liked the sugar water just fine, and the reward center was active. But the teen brains went cuckoo bananas for the sugar water, like, oh my God, this is the best sugar water I've ever tasted. It's amazing. I love this sugar water. This combination of an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex to say, let's think this through, and a very responsive reward center that shouts, this is awesome, can lead to great adventures and also some extra risk-taking behavior. This is by design because the job of the adolescent is to take adventures, get rewarded for their learning experiences, and someday get out of their parents' basements. Unfortunately, this is a perfect setup for addiction. The rewards are very rewarding, so the limbic system keeps telling you to go back for more. And your underdeveloped prefrontal cortex has trouble putting on the brakes. So you seek out the rewarding experience again and again. This is what has been found across substances and in multiple studies. The younger you are when you start using, the more likely you are to become addicted. I'm going to tell you specifically about 3 different drugs and show how their effects on the adolescent brain put you at risk for future addiction and harm. First, alcohol. Early use predicts addiction. If you start using alcohol under the age of 15, there's a 40% chance you will develop dependence. That number goes down to 10% if you start after 21. Waiting is protective. What about marijuana? If it's legal, it must be safe, right? Wrong. And like alcohol, it's not legal in any state for teenagers, and for good reason. Early marijuana users have abnormal reward processing, so the things you used to enjoy cause less of a reward response in your brain. Not surprising then is that marijuana also worsens depression. Early THC abuse can also lower IQ scores, sometimes permanently. And here's that same theme. Early users are much more likely to become addicted to weed. Yes, about 1 in 6 people who use marijuana become dependent on it. E-cigarettes. Every jewel contains nicotine. I'm going to say that one more time in case you were checking your Instagram feed. Every jewel contains nicotine. I know very few of you want to become smokers. You know it's smelly and expensive and can cause lung disease, stroke, cancer, and death. For that reason alone, you should never try vaping. Several large, well-done studies have shown that if you vape, you are up to 7 times more likely to become a smoker than if you don't. We're not together right now because COVID is making people sick and keeping us apart. It's important that you know what vaping does to your risk of COVID. A study of over 4,000 teens and young adults from all over the country showed that among those who were tested for COVID-19, those who had used e-cigarettes were 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with COVID-19 than non-users. So parents, what can you do? Be a good role model. Use healthy coping strategies instead of that glass of wine or 3 when you're stressed. Try to model moderation. Don't drink with your kids or serve them alcohol. I understand parents who do this are well-intentioned, but research just doesn't support it. Early alcohol exposure sets you up for addiction, even if it's served to you by your parents. The reward centers can't tell the difference. Talk to your kids. Parents are the #1 influence on their kids' decision to drink, not their friends, not the internet, their parents. Teens whose parents told them underage drinking is completely unacceptable are 80% less likely to drink. Don't leave your kids home alone overnight. This makes it more likely they will experiment with drugs and alcohol, especially if you leave a full liquor cabinet. Help them sleep. No phone in the bedroom. I know my speaker evaluations just tanked, but I'll say it again. No phone in the bedroom. We know well that sleep deprivation can lead to depression and anxiety in teens. It's also been shown that adolescents who sleep less than 8 hours per night are more likely to use tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana. My town recently moved to later school start times for middle and high schoolers to help combat teen sleep deprivation. Not every fork in the road will be obvious. I hope I was able to show you that using drugs and alcohol, especially starting to use them, is in fact a big fork in the road. It's a decision that could impact the rest of your life and future decisions. When someone hands you that drink, you're at a fork in the road. And if they hand you a Juul, and if they hand you weed. When deciding which way to go, when you're presented with these decisions, I hope you give it some thought. Of course, there will be pros, or no one would ever drink or do drugs. You get to feel tipsy like this baby, and you get to enjoy partying with your friends. I mentioned a few compelling things for the con column, but the biggest one for me is your big, amazing, reward-loving brain. Protect it from addiction. Let it keep getting super excited about sugar and sports and music and seeing your crush in the hall between classes. I wasn't a drinker in high school for a few reasons. One, I was a nerd. I'm okay with that now. Two, I was afraid of getting in trouble, and I definitely would have. Three, I was always a designated driver. And the most important reason I didn't drink in high school was that my brother, Peter, died 2 days before my senior year. I couldn't risk stressing out my parents anymore. That tomboy in the sporty blue jacket is me. And next to me is my sister, Kathleen, who may take care of your cats and dogs at her vet clinic. That drunk woman who killed my brother didn't know she was at a fork in the road when she took her first drink. Now you do. Choose wisely. Experimenting with drugs and alcohol is not a race. Wait, let your brains finish doing their thing. See the forks and choose your brains and the future you dream of. Thank you.